afternoon and welcome to First Financial Biz Beat, presented by the Business Courier. I'm Kyla Woods. Well, before most of us had even heard of the coronavirus, a small local company made a big bet, and now it's paying off in spades. On the front page centerpiece this week, the little lab that could. Gravity Diagnostics started 4 years ago, largely testing what medications work best in your body. Well, in January, thousands of miles away from the virus, which was largely confined then to parts of China, a scientist in the Covington lab saw an opportunity to develop a way to test for it. And now the company provides tests to hundreds of organizations around the country and analyzes tens of thousands of them a day. They know behind every test kit that comes through their doors, there's a story.
We had one story where a mother gave birth and she was not able to see her baby until she got a result back, and because we had fast turnaround time, she was able to see her child sooner.
Gravity's president says the goal all along was to make an impact and do something to try to save the world. It's safe to say that's certainly happening. So what's next? For that, we turn to Courier editor Rob Dahmeyer and reporter Liz Engel.
Liz, thanks so much for being here.
Hi.
So why did you decide to write about Gravity Diagnostics in the first place? We do a lot of stories on growing companies at the Courier, but we have to pick and choose who we write about. Why Gravity?
Well, I think it's a great, fantastic growth story. The company's been around locally since 2016, but a lot of people didn't know about them. And they weren't doing any kind of COVID testing until January or February, when they decided to jump into this market. And since then, their growth has hockey sticked, which is probably one of my favorite words I've ever used in a story recently.
Well, yeah. What does that growth look like? Like, where were they a couple years ago? Where are they now?
I think they had about 30 employees when this all started. They now have 300. So talk about onboarding that many people is just a task in its own right. They've grown out of space. So I think they've increased square footage by like 900%.
Wow.
And then revenue has followed. I think they were a $5 million company last year, and they are about $87 million to date this year. And that number will exponentially increase because testing has also increased.
So we know why they're growing. They're growing because we have this horrible virus and they're involved in that. But could you be a little more specific? Tell the viewers what exactly they do and why it's working.
Yeah, so they receive tests, shipments of tests from hospitals, nursing homes, and they process those tests. It's a multi-system process, and they have lots of scientists and PhDs that work on that initiative, but they had to invest heavily in equipment to be able to do that. And then they, of course, need all these people to be able to manage the numbers of tests that they're receiving. I think they were testing maybe 20 samples a day in March, and they're up to almost 20,000 a day now.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Is this growth sustainable? You said it was a hockey stick, and hockey sticks you don't go up forever. But when you talk to the company, how did they feel like? Is this something that they could continue into next year?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the company leadership is going to say that they can sustain this, and of course, that will be interesting to watch and interesting to see how that goes. There's a lot of different areas they can go. They've built a lot of new relationships with customers. They're working with University of Cincinnati that eventually could lead to new business, and they could grow organically. They could acquire other labs. So there's a lot of different ways they could sustain the growth. But I think that will be the most interesting piece of this to watch.
And speaking of what to watch, what should we be on the lookout for them for next year specifically? Is this a company that's looking for more funding? Are they looking to possibly go public?
Yeah, their leaders are really, really bullish on going public. That's the next step. They're kind of gearing up for that. The biggest question is what kind of value will that be for investors? That had such quick growth, and if they can sustain that, yeah, it'll be a big home run for the region.
Yeah. Well, it's a great story you wrote. I recommend everybody grab it when you get the paper or read us online. It's just a really good, in-depth, fun read about a company in Covington. It's called, the headline's The Little Lab That Could, just to give you an idea of what it's about. Liz, you did a great job on it. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right.
Thank you, Rob and Liz. Well, it's becoming clear that a vaccine is coming, and soon. Just yesterday, Pfizer announced it will seek emergency use authorization from the FDA. This comes a few days after the company said its vaccine was 95% effective with no serious side effects. Moderna says its vaccine is just as effective. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine says the state will get 30,000 doses as early as a few weeks from now. Hamilton County is preparing.
We have purchased two walk-in freezers, one walk-in refrigerator, and we have also, as of the middle of December, will have our own ability for ultra-cold storage, which is primarily the Pfizer vaccine at -90 Fahrenheit.
Here locally, the doses will go to University of Cincinnati Medical Center. The vaccines will go to first responders and high-risk groups first. But the vaccine isn't here yet, and cases are spreading like wildfire, so restrictions are coming back. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear says inaction is deadly.
We are not going to surrender to the coronavirus. We are not going to simply throw our hands up and take what fatalities it will bring. I believe this will be the most important thing that I ever have to do in my professional life, and I'm going to make sure that we do it right. None of us want to look back on this epidemic, this pandemic, and say we gave up. Say we could have done just a little bit more based on what we knew at the time.
And Beshear is doing more. It starts at home. All indoor gatherings are limited to 2 families and 8 people or less. The limit is 25 people per room at weddings and funerals. All schools are going virtual until the new year. Gyms can only operate at 33% capacity with no group training. And the industry that may be the most crippled is restaurants. There's no more indoor dining anywhere until December 13th.
I'll be able to pull open my awning and leave, so you'll have the fresh air coming through. But I have it pretty warm in there, so I think it should be good to go.
The state is setting up a $40 million relief fund to help restaurants and bars. Businesses can get up to $10,000. In Ohio, a curfew is back. It's from 10 p.m. until 5 a.m. for the next 3 weeks. You are asked to leave home only for work, school, and emergency, or for essentials like picking up food. And there are no dining restrictions like in Kentucky, but places that operate late, pool halls, comedy clubs, bowling alleys, and bars could be in for a tough few weeks.
I would imagine that we'd have to close a little bit earlier than what we have been closing so that people can get home by 10. Which they probably won't go home by 10. That's another issue that I think a lot of us bar people have with this. On a Friday night, you're out with friends at 9:30, they're probably just not going to call it a night. They're probably going to go over to somebody's house and hang out, and the virus is still going to spread. At least here, these bars and stuff, we're implementing some restrictions. There's no restrictions at a house party.
Bars are now losing out on at least 4 hours of business during the most profitable time of the day. Those on the front lines of this pandemic are getting a thank you. TriHealth is giving full-time employees a one-time $500 bonus. Part-timers will get $250, and that includes the hundreds of employees who were affected by job cuts. TriHealth is Cincinnati's 4th largest employer with nearly 14,000 employees. A 3rd city council member has been arrested for bribery. PG Sittenfeld is accused of trading votes for money. He allegedly said, "I can deliver the votes." The person the feds say he told it to was an undercover FBI agent. Investigators say $40,000 he solicited didn't go into his pocket, but into a political slush fund secretly controlled by Sittenfeld, and that's illegal.
The way he did this was to have checks of $5,000 was the max that can go to a PAC, written to this PAC that he indicated to the undercover officers, undercover FBI agents, could not be traced back to him. He also told them to use different LLCs in different names to be placed into that PAC, not so the money couldn't be traced back to them.
The man who brought this all to light is developer and former Bengal Chinedum Ndukwe. The feds say by the time Sittenfeld approached him in 2018, Ndukwe was already working with the FBI in a similar case involving fellow council member Jeff Pastor. And now there are calls for reform for what the feds say has become a culture of corruption at City Hall.
It's hard not to conclude that in Samaya and Jeff's case, at least part of it was desperation for cash. In this case, it seems to be to accumulate power for power's sake.
Tamaya Denard, who was arrested in February, will be sentenced next week. Jeff Passer has not resigned. Up next on BizBeat, what needs to be fixed for the Brent Spence Bridge to reopen and when that date may be. It'll be another month before the Brent Spence Bridge opens back up. State leaders say the hope is to reopen December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. It's been closed for 10 days since 2 tractor trailers collided, sparking a huge fire. Inspectors spent several days examining the bridge. They say the fire did not damage the bridge's integrity, but there are still millions of dollars worth of repairs to be done, including replacing some steel beams and slabs of concrete. This past couple weeks have been a microcosm of the markets this whole year. Record highs on Monday wiped out over the next couple of days. First Financial's Kirk Copenhaver talks with Courier Market Engagement Director Kelly Snyder about whether the presidential election is playing a role.
So, Kirk, it's been about a month since you've been here, and the election has come and gone. Did the market respond like you had hoped?
Well, one thing we really try to avoid doing is trading on political events, really for 2 reasons. 1, they're getting harder and harder to predict. And 2, the market impact is rarely what you think it would be. If you look at 2016, for example, Donald Trump was running on a platform that touted deregulation and also reviving manufacturing in America. After its victory, the sectors that you would think would most benefit from this agenda, energy and financials from deregulation, and then industrials and materials from the manufacturing side, really outperformed over that first month. But after that, those sectors that were supposed to benefit most from his agenda were actually some of the worst performing sectors for the remainder of his term. So the takeaway here really is that it's difficult to trade on political events because things rarely play out exactly as you would expect.
If you don't adjust your outlook based on the election, how have you been positioning your client portfolios?
Yeah, so one of the themes we've been talking about over the last couple months is the idea of a reflation reset, where rising interest rates, rising inflation, and a weaker dollar really start to influence the market. Since the election, it appears that the market's beginning to come around to this idea. I mean, you just look at the yield on the 10-year Treasury, it's up pretty significantly since bottoming at 0.6% in August. Also, there's optimism building around COVID vaccines being available sooner rather than later, which would lead to the economy reopening and activity really picking back up. Also, investors seem okay with the potential for divided government. It's important to remember that gridlock in Washington is usually pretty good for stocks as long as nothing really needs to get done. So assuming Washington can hammer out another fiscal stimulus package, a divided government should be pretty good for stocks going forward.
Interesting. So what else are you seeing in the markets right now?
We think we could be seeing the start of a leadership rotation away from growth stocks and into more cyclical value stocks. Heading into the pandemic, broadly speaking, earnings growth was slowing and more difficult to come by. So investors really bid up the shares of those companies that could provide that earnings growth. You're looking at the Fab Five: Microsoft, Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon, plus a few others here and there. Then, during the lockdown, those again were some of the same few companies that could reliably deliver that precious earnings growth in this new kind of COVID economy. And this led investors to drive up their prices and valuations even higher. But as growth becomes easier to come by in 2021, with the economy presumably opening back up and companies lapping those trough earnings levels from earlier this year, growth should be fairly easy to come by. So usually in this scenario, investors typically start selling their expensive growth stocks and start to go bargain shopping among cheaper value issues that can now deliver some of that earnings growth. And this is how the value rotation usually plays out. And we're beginning to see it happen now with the recent relative outperformance of the Russell 1000 Value Index versus the Russell 1000 Growth Index. And that's really being driven by financials, industrials, and commodity-oriented companies.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for the update, and thanks for being here. We look forward to seeing you in about a month or so. So have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you, Kelly and Kirk. Well, still to come on First Financial Biz Beat, the makeover of the former U.S. playing card site gets a makeover. The new plans for the piece of American history. Demolition of the old U.S. playing card site is complete. Updated designs show the historical clock tower is the focal point for the project. The development in Norwood will include housing, retail space, and green space. The new designs include a larger fireplace in the central green. And as for that clock tower, it will be a standalone building with a viewing deck. There are very few businesses that haven't been affected by the pandemic. Courier publisher Jamie Smith talked with the executive producer of KPG Creative about some of the pivots companies are making to survive.
Thank you, Kyla, and good morning, Scott. Thanks for being here. You know, you and KPG have been a savior to the Business Courier during this year of the pandemic. We've had events canceled since mid-March, and we've had to kind of change the way that we want to connect and honor our business leaders. Have you at KPG seen a shift or a change because of COVID-19 in how they're doing events, and if they are canceling events, what they're doing to pivot?
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie. And I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. But absolutely. So KPG Creative is a live event and video production company. And so we do events all across the country. And absolutely, in mid-March, we saw pretty much all of our clients abandon their in-person meetings, and everything just went away. At that point, we really had to think about who we're going to be and how we're going to survive this. And we were able to take our experience in the video world and take our clients who trust us, who want to continue communicating with their audiences. And we were able to say, all right, look, we can't do in-person events, but you can still communicate with your audiences. You can still connect with your employees, with your customers. And so, from that initial point in mid-March, we really buckled down and really dove headfirst and partnered with our video experience and took it into the streaming world. And, it really has been a great experience. We've actually even picked up new clients in this whole crazy world that we live in now.
That's awesome. Can you give maybe some examples of options that companies are taking to replace those events?
Yeah, 8 months ago, nobody probably even heard of Zoom, and now it's a pretty common word out in the world. And so every day, I probably hear of a new platform, a new widget, a new platform that our customers are saying, "Hey, can you take a look at this? Can you take a look at this demo?" And the reality is, the platform, if it's Zoom or if it's WebEx or if it's Hopin or if it's any of these other different virtual platforms that are out there, you got to remember, it's about the content. You got to create great content for your audience that's on the other side of that screen to stay engaged, so they don't get up and take their dog for a walk. So they don't get up and make, whatever it may be. So it really, to me and to KPG Creative, it starts with content. You got to have great content. The other thing is, today's environment, Zoom calls, Google Meet calls, WebEx calls, everybody's doing them. I think it's become extremely saturated. So really, it's, today we got to take it to virtual conference calls or virtual meetings. We got to take it to the 2.0 version or the 3.0 version. So that really, in my world or in KPG's world, means increasing production value. So, taking that leap and not just doing a Zoom call, but really incorporating transitions and graphics and really thinking about it as a live event versus just a video streaming event.
Yeah, you've done a great job with us. We've already produced the 40 Under 40 event this year, which, we usually have 800 people in a conference room celebrating. Our honorees are dancing down the stage. As you said, you're in your seat at a conference room. You're not as likely to get up and leave as if you're in your lazy boy in your living room. It's very easy to get up and turn that off. But you did a great job. If you were talking to our customers out there who are thinking about using video, what kind of advice would you give them?
I'm going to go back to what I kind of just said. Number one, it's about content. Number two, it's about increasing that production value. But ultimately at KPG Creative, and the way that I think that we've been able to succeed in this new digital world of video events and video conferencing and connecting with people, is that it's not an off-the-shelf product. It's really about having a communication, an open dialogue with our customers and even our prospects to say, look, who is it that we want to talk to? How is it that we want to communicate to them? What is the results that we want out of this? And then together, we comb through and come up with a great solution. That might be, increasing the production value in a Zoom call. That might be building a custom website and pushing a Vimeo or a YouTube stream with high production values into their already existing domain. Or it also might be partnering with their platform that they've already chosen. We have the capabilities to push a lot of streams into almost every platform that's out there. So really, it starts with a conversation. It's really understanding the customer and understanding how we're going to get to what they want to have done.
Excellent. Well, I can speak from experience. You know what our customers like. You know what we like. You know how to get us there. So I urge everybody that's thinking about video to reach out to Scott and KPG. Thank you so much, Scott, and I will see you again soon.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate the time.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, Jamie, and thanks to Scott for those tips. Well, thank you for joining us for First Financial Biz Beat. For business news around the clock, make sure you visit CincinnatiBusinessCourier.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and also sign up for our daily emails. I'm Kyla Woods. I hope you have a wonderful and safe weekend.